those decisions are not especially popular at home either.
So the Trump administration is now firing several hundred aviation workers who help keep air traffic control systems running less than 3 weeks after one of the deadliest commercial airline crashes in recent American history. So this is according to CNN, who reports that, quote, the Trump administration has started firing several hundred FAA probationary employees who are employees that, quote, maintain the technology that prevents mid-air disasters, keeps planes from colliding, and ensures smooth takeoffs and landings. So I guess Donald Trump's answer to all of the recent plane crashes that we have seen across the country is to slash more airline personnel, those specifically who are in charge of maintaining air traffic control systems, which will lead to more delays, more staff shortages, and could result in more accidents. Somebody explain how that's going to help stop the planes from crashing.
Hey, to whoever brought this sign to the protest at the state capitol in Texas today, whoever you are, I just want you to know that you are invited to everything going forward. Till the end of time, you are invited to all things. We're talking brunches, birthdays, bowling, movie theaters, fuck. Doesn't matter. We'll see you there. This is the energy that I'm looking for out of everyone, everywhere, at all times. Okay? So, love to see it. Great work. Keep it up. Love you guys.
We just have no information. We were just basically tossed out on the streets. And so that has been angering and heartbreaking. And our pay stopped the day we got the termination letter. So we're all without a paycheck as of Tuesday.
Yeah, we are standing just in view of the Capitol, Kira, and you can hear the chant actually go up around me of "do your job," and that is in reference to the protesters tell us here, the people who work in this building right here, the United States Capitol. We've also heard of chant after chant of where is Congress, asking for some kind of congressional oversight into this massive overhaul of the federal government that President Trump and Elon Musk are engineering. There are federal workers here in the crowd. Some of them have even been fired in recent days, they tell us. And one of the sentiments we hear from those here is, of course, opposition to this effort of Trump and Musk to overhaul the federal government, but also a sense that this is far from over yet. I've talked to people here. I've also talked to people across the country, federal workers, who say it's their understanding from talking to their colleagues and seeing these actions that this is only one of the early phases of these terminations, Kira, and they are preparing for many more.
To this end, French President Emmanuel Macron has called for a summit of European leaders to get together tomorrow to discuss the implications of Donald Trump. This is exactly what I'm talking about. The actions of the United States, the actions of this current administration affect the rest of the world. So much so that there's an emergency meeting called to discuss Donald Trump's actions and how they affect the countries in Europe. This meeting is meant to discuss Donald Trump's actions as it relates to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and most recently, J.D. Vance's comments in Munich. Again, there are effects felt around the world. It is not just felt here in the U.S. Donald Trump's executive orders are felt worldwide.
I just watched an interview on Fox talking about how President Trump signed an executive order to have all the money found by Doge sent back to American taxpayers, the $40 billion that they found. Now, if you divide $40 billion by 160 million people or so of the working class in America, I mean, we're talking about roughly $240,000 per person.
MAGA math, you gotta love it. You know, let's assume that Doge found $40 billion in waste. Math, you gotta love it. You know, let's assume that Doge found $40 billion in waste, and let's assume that they were going to give it back to the American taxpayers, right? And let's assume that 160 million people would benefit from that. I love the sound of $255,000 coming back into my pocket. That, on paper, sounds great. Unfortunately, that's not the way math works. Because if you divide 40 billion by 160 million, you don't get $250,000. You get $250. Yeah, we're a few zeros off. And I don't need anybody coming in here and saying, well, Doge actually is now found. It doesn't matter. So give me $350. This is why people get lied to, and this is why people get whipped up into a frenzy. The comments, everyone's like, I could really use $250,000 right now. Like, that'd be life-changing. Yeah, no shit. But it's not going to happen. A, you're not going to see a dime of any cost savings that Elon Musk has found. Trust me. Anything that is potentially found is going right back into the government contracts that he gets, and it's going right back into Donald Trump's pocket. I guarantee you that. And B, this is not a number that is even real. So we put this bad math out here. Nobody checks it. A few people did, but most people don't check it, and they just see this as like, oh, that would be so great. That would be life-changing. Yeah, it would. If it were real, if you weren't off multiple decimal points. So MAGA math for the L.
Will Trump cause a brain drain of scientists from the States? Yep. I think so. I'm pretty sure so. And I think Canada and Europe are going to be the major recipients of that dynamic and should actively invest in advertising that and taking advantage of that. So let me explain. Let me go into more detail. Already into this term, Trump has been so chaotic in terms of funding mechanisms that I think that it takes away from US science stability, certainty, and the ability to act and engage in scientific activities without political interference. And you're already seeing that from the National Institutes of Health and from other bodies that are already looking very alarmed over their continuing funding, but also the notions of political interference, which go across universities, which go across terminology, and you can see all the kind of witch hunts that are going to happen. Now, since the Second World War, America has done particularly well on high-value immigration, if you will, from scientists fleeing Europe and then coalescing in the States and attracting the rest of the world's talents to the States, where there was funding, where there was freedom, and there was then habits built on how you can basically do science in the language of science, the English language, and build there. And the UK has done well from that as well. But Trump looks to be blowing it, and I would not underestimate the long-term impact of him doing that. So what I think is going to happen is not just brain drain from America itself, but there's also going to be brain diversion of the natural flow of talent in the world from its usual habitual patterns to seek out the States to actually go elsewhere. So, why? Firstly, ignoring American scientists themselves who will find increasingly themselves to be oppressed by Trump and Trump's way of thinking and look to go elsewhere. There is also the fact that when you pull the plug on things like USAID, those collaborative structures between the US and other countries around the world are going to vanish, and people who are invested in those other countries around the world and sorting out malaria there or AIDS there or other infectious diseases there, they're specialists in that. And if they can't use the US as a base to do that, they're going to do it from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, or they're going to do it from one of the French or German institutions. And so they will pick up jobs in order to be able to carry on the work that they were doing. Similarly, for lots of talent around the world that are graduating from their degrees or PhDs and looking where to go, if they're white skinned, they might look at the States and think, I'm not welcome there anymore. I don't want to set up there. I would rather go to another country in the world which is advanced in the area of my study, but that is going to welcome me in without any prejudice. So they will be looking at other English-speaking countries that have that available, like the UK, like Canada, like Australia, like Ireland, which is in the EU, or even think about the Scandinavian countries or Germany, where, English is becoming a native language, because any lab you go to in the world will be full of English speakers because it's got an international mix for a start, but secondly, English is the science language of the world. So you have to understand how mobile scientists are these days. Not only is everyone who works in science someone who can communicate in the English language and can usually communicate with maths as well, so they can work anywhere. But usually when you publish papers these days, it is an international collaboration that you use to publish with. So you've got friends and you've got links in other nations, and so you can just pick up the phone to them and say, are there any jobs going in your area? That's how modern science works, and scientists are really fluid. And so it could happen quite quickly that America's natural ability to gravitate science to them falls apart because people aren't incoming, and those that are homegrown are looking to build elsewhere. And I'm thinking particularly here of the life sciences because life science and states are looking really under pressure at the moment with Mr. Kennedy and his bizarre ideas, but all research is going to be completely at risk, and lots of other research relating to biology could have strong political interference, and furthermore, within scientists, you usually have a population which is very morally driven, as in you do science for a purpose. It's about humanity. And as I know, as someone who founded Scientists for EU when Brexit happened, scientists don't just go where it's advantageous for their career. They know the value that they can deliver to a country, and they sure as hell are not going to deliver to a country where they feel that that country doesn't support their philosophies and their outlook on life. It isn't a champion of where they want to go in humanity. So I think America could have a massive brain drain starting to happen soon. Major beneficiaries being Canada, Ireland, the UK, Scandinavian countries, Germany, maybe Australia, but it's a bit distant. You get the idea. That us in Europe should be working on that hard and fast. And I think that it would be actually very beneficial to the UK and Europe as a whole as well, because one thing that Americans are very good at, American academics are very good at, is converting academic research into actual small businesses and actual entrepreneurship, which is actively encouraged in the States to a much greater degree than it is in the UK or in wider Europe. And that injection of talent from the States that already have cultural competence at doing that would be great at a time where in Europe you have had the Draghi reforms proposed, which is about stripping away lots of barriers to getting innovation going. So Europe as a whole could really, really benefit from Trump being anti-science and his whole team around him being fundamentally anti-science in their outlook on life and in their sheer ignorance. And so look out for that one. But Canada and the UK and Europe as a whole should be really capitalizing on that right about now and advertising that and thinking about how you actively encourage it.
This is going to sound crazy coming from this accent, but I firmly believe that we in the rest of the democratic world need to boycott American goods and services. We need an anti-MAGA boycott. Every day we allow a company like Elon Musk, X, and Tesla to operate on this continent and around the world is a day that we are helping to further empower and entrench his power in the United States, one that is currently dismantling their constitutional republic. And we have to be very serious. They are not stopping at the United States. They are actively invested and engaged on a huge level in Europe and have been for years. Enough is enough. We need to support our local economies and the economies of other democratic countries that still have dedication to democracy and the rules-based world order, where instead of imperialism, we decide and discuss our problems and come to agreements. This will be really hard for a lot of us. A lot of us are so inundated with so much American stuff all the
time, from our computer systems to the literal phone I'm talking to you on right now. This will be hard, but every amount that we take away from the American project, from the MAGA project, is weakening it, and it is something that can be targeted at specific districts to maximize damage to Donald Trump's political base. That is how we, from the rest of the world, can do the maximum amount of damage. Just as the Canadians have shown by leading the way, we need to stand. We need to stand together as Europeans, as Canadians, as Mexicans, as Greenlanders, as people from around the democratic world. It is imperative we fight back against Donald Trump. Support the anti-MAGA boycott.
Please repost this or else nobody's going to see it and I won't get paid. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Hey y'all, it's me all in good fun on February 17th and today's President's Day, so I thought I'd take a minute to talk about the history of the day and its meaning. So President's Day was first celebrated in 1799 after the death of George Washington, and it was celebrated on the day of February 22nd because that was George Washington's birthday.
Birthday? They ought to celebrate Donald Trump's birthday. We'll call it a day of mourning.
Don't mind my husband. He's always interrupting. Let me keep going. So anyway, it continued to be celebrated unofficially on that same day, February 22nd. But by 1832, it became a much big, also included the reading of Washington's farewell address to the Senate.
I want that farewell to the Senate from the orange menace, that dictator we got currently.
Okay. Anyway, thank you, honey. So in 1971, so cut to lots of years later, Congress passed something called the Uniform Monday Holiday Act. Because we've been celebrating George Washington's birthday on February 22nd, but also celebrating Abraham Lincoln's birthday on February 12th. So they decided to take the third Monday of the month of February, call it President's Day, and consolidate Washington and Lincoln's birthdays and use the day as a day to celebrate some of the greatest presidents of the United States.
Well, we sure ain't going to be celebrating any more presidents because the current grifter, that orange monster, he's just a dictator. He's the worst ever.
Okay, honey, thank you very much. I'm going to have the last word. So like I said, President's Day became a national holiday to honor and celebrate presidents of the United States, but also to honor the United States of America. What's left of it?
Donald Trump just spoke words that I never thought I would ever hear a president say. Well, he didn't speak them. He put them out on Truth Social like he normally does. He who saves his country does not violate any law. And here it is for you, right there. He who saves his country does not violate any law. Now, these are the words of an authoritarian dictator. See, he's putting himself above anybody else in the country. He's saying that nobody can contain him, that he won't follow the orders of judges, that he won't do what Congress tells him to do because he can't break a law. So if he can't break a law, then nobody can have him obey the law. So Donald Trump has just straight up said he doesn't care. He's going to do what he wants. He's going to violate the Constitution. He's going to violate any agreements or laws that he wants to because he thinks he's saving the country, all while destroying it.
I'm not sure remembers what happened the last time that Trump had negotiations with our enemies without having the country being discussed involved, but 13 American service members died. This weekend, Russia and U.S. agreed to talks without Ukraine to press ahead with bid to end war. Trump and his administration are meeting with Russia in order to continue to appease his best friend Putin and give away Ukrainian territory. This is after Trump promised you that he would end the Ukrainian war on day one, which is just another lie he told you. I know many people forgot, but the last time he was president, Trump had a secret deal with the Taliban in which he gave everything away. People like to say that Trump is the king of the deal, but he always gives everything away because he is so insecure. Negotiating with our enemies without our allies involved will put American service members at risk. And Trump knows this, but he does not care. Because if you remember, he calls us veterans suckers and losers. But you are the real sucker and loser if you think Trump cares about this country or our allies at all.
The other day, Donald Trump and Republicans put out their new tax bill that focuses on Donald Trump's priorities. And what do you know? It's a big handout to the ultra wealthy in this country. The Republican-controlled House Budget Committee voted along party lines to advance a massive budget blueprint to slash taxes and spending by trillions of dollars. They've sent the full budget resolution to the House, and they've instructed committees to craft a massive package to pass Donald Trump's agenda. The budget calls for up to $4.5 trillion in new deficits through tax cuts, which Republicans plan to use to extend Donald Trump's 2017 tax law that is expiring. This budget calls for $4.5 trillion in new deficits through tax cuts, which Republicans plan to use to extend Donald Trump's 2017 tax law, which cut taxes for the ultra-wealthy, and most of the benefits went to the top 1%. But here's the main thing Republicans don't want you to know about this budget resolution. It calls for $1.5 trillion in spending cuts with an additional caveat. The House package has to include $2 trillion in cuts to the mandatory part of federal spending, which covers programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and food benefits. Now, Democrats tried to put forward amendments to make sure that these programs weren't targeted, and Republicans rejected all of them. So remember when Republicans told you that they weren't going after these crucial programs that millions of Americans rely on? Yeah, they totally lied. This is Donald Trump's priority right now. Tax cuts for the wealthy, cutting programs for middle-income Americans. Who could have seen this coming? If TikTok ever gets banned, my Instagram, my YouTube, and my Substack are linked in my bio. That's where I'm going to be.
Good morning. While you were sleeping, the Trump administration made some more very dangerous and very unpopular decisions as they relate to foreign policy. Marco Rubio is in Israel right now, meeting with Netanyahu. There is a ceasefire in place, which is the plan that should be being executed right now, but is not being executed. Hamas is still holding several dozen hostages. Israel was supposed to allow in about 60,000 mobile homes and 200,000 tents, but those resources are being held at the Egyptian border. Only about 20,000 temporary shelters have made their way into Gaza. And Israel is now claiming that instead of upholding the ceasefire, they will begin phase 1 of invoking what they call Trump's plan to remove all Palestinians from Gaza. Saudi Arabia, which is supposed to be a partner in the Middle East, has said that they do not support Trump's ethnic cleansing plans. And I'm not using the word ethnic cleansing lightly, okay? The literal definition of ethnic cleansing is the systemic forced removal of ethnic, racial, or religious groups from a given area. Marco Rubio is now headed to Saudi Arabia to get ready for those conversations that are happening between Putin and Trump on Tuesday. And Netanyahu is headed to Cairo to negotiate the resettlement of Gazans in Egypt, something that he continues to call Trump's plan. He also calls it the only viable solution for an enduring future for Gazans, which sounds a little bit like when someone else called the forced removal of a certain ethnic group the final solution. The Arab states continue to push back against this ethnic cleansing plan, even though Trump and Netanyahu say, but it's not an ethnic cleansing because we're asking the Gazans to go voluntarily. The Gazans have said no. There is no voluntary plan to relocate to Egypt for any of them. As you are waking up, it will be nighttime over there, so we probably won't have any new information throughout much of the day. But I think it's super important for all Americans to know that Netanyahu executing an ethnic cleansing is being called Trump's plan. And the Arab states like Iran and Saudi Arabia, Jordan and Egypt, who do not agree with this plan, do agree if it moves forward, it will be because of the United States. And we will be held responsible for enabling Netanyahu. This week's news is all about foreign policy. Eyes are on Saudi Arabia, where Marco Rubio is there to negotiate what's happening with Gaza, and Trump will meet with Putin on Tuesday to negotiate what happens with Ukraine. But neither Gazans nor Ukraine will be in Saudi Arabia to hold up their side of an argument. So, I will have more when we know more. This isn't to scare you, it's just to prepare you. The United States is making some very unpopular decisions abroad.
Whether that's fighting Vladimir Putin. If we don't take action now and stand for our values, stand for our liberal left-wing values, then I believe they will be under threat and possibly destroyed forever. Now, obviously, America is a nuclear-armed country, and that poses a serious challenge. But sometimes you have to stand up and fight for what you believe in, no matter what the challenge is or what the consequences might be. Diplomatically, this will be very difficult, given our long-standing allyship with the United States. But sometimes allies do turn on each other, and times change. And you have to stand up for your values, no matter what.